like the Penn State football team, I'm a slave to the process. So as much as everyone has already flushed the UCLA game, we're talking about it today. Don't worry, though. We're also talking about USC. The BWI Mailbag was 99.9999% questions about USC, matchups, Penn State's play so far this season, how it relates to that. So we are talking about that game coming up at the end of the show. That's going to be our preview through the lens of your questions about that. And, of course, whatever you got for us here in the live chat. We're going to be talking to you throughout the show because this is BWI Live. This is your chance to hang out with myself, with Nate Bauer, and with Sean Fitz, our expert Penn State football reporters. Gentlemen, welcome to the show. Nate, I want to get your thoughts about the beginning of the week so far as we enter the heart of Big Ten play.
Yeah.
USC. Oh, we're here. We're finally here. It's happening.
Yeah. But let's talk
Right.
about the airport, because that's
That's talking about USC, Nate. I don't know whether you know this or not. In fact, this is going to be your area of expertise later. But yes, we will be talking about the Penn State airport.
Yeah, I scanned the Twitter, now known as X, and you'll be surprised to learn that there are many uninformed takes. Hashtag takes.
I thought you were going to say there are many airport experts out there. Suddenly, there's a rash of aviation experts on the internet.
People just are very uncomfortable with things that they don't know, and so they latch on and it's anyway. Good times. Love the airport, and am very much looking forward to a trip to Los Angeles this weekend.
Fitz, we've got your recruiting update coming up in just 1 second, but high-level thoughts to start the show about Penn State football as it enters this particular week, which I know is the most exciting of the Pac-12 teams joining the Big Ten for college football fans in general, I think.
I would put them behind Oregon, but that's just maybe recency bias. But no, I don't have anything as good as airports, so I'm not sure why we would go to me. But no, I mean, it's a big week, regardless of USC falling out of the top 25. That does not make them a bad team. It makes them an underachieving team, I think. And I think you look at Lincoln Riley's tenure so far, and you probably say the same thing about that whole breadth of action there. So, but still a huge game for Penn State. It's playoff chances, and I can't wait to not go to LA this weekend because I don't need a 5-hour flight in economy class folded up in those seats. So,
whoa.
I mean, it's a little different for you guys. I'm sorry. Like I play the height card all the time for different reasons, but you guys can fit in an airplane seat pretty fine and be okay with it. So I'm not.
This is one of the times where I'm in total agreement. I am super glad that I can't reach things on the top shelf in my kitchen for those reasons exactly. But Fitz, we're going to get to your other specialty in life, not just pickup basketball, is Penn State football recruiting. So we're going to get to that right now because it was a big weekend for the Nittany Lions. Fitz, what do we have? I know there's a lot of really good premium information over at bluewhiteillustrated.com, and whenever that happens and we're here on the internet live for everyone to talk about it, I always get a little skittish. So I'm just opening the gate, and you can run wherever you would like to in the field of recruiting conversation. So what's up?
Well, right out of the gate, we are running a flash sale. Code WEARE. Get 50% off your first year at Blue White. I think it's very much worth it if you want to take another step inside following Penn State football. There's my little pitch, but a big play this week for Penn State in terms of that UCLA game. Noon kick. So, the visitor list you expected to be a little bit light. It wasn't. It was a very good list for a noon kick. I think that Penn State has been pushing this one for a long time, but not because of the opponent, not because of the game time, because of the schedule. Penn State doesn't play at home again until November 2nd, and that's an issue. Like, that is not, isn't nothing you can do about it. I mean, we're not complaining. It's just the fact of the matter is that Penn State can't host recruits for a full month, and that's half of the remaining recruiting period for the class of 2025, because signing day is on December 4th this year. It's not December 20th or whatever.
Oh, that's right.
Yes. So signing day on December 4th means the last time you're going to get guys on campus is for that Maryland game after Thanksgiving. So I guess it's good you have that. you've got the whiteout, of course, and working backwards, you've got Ohio State. So 3 premium opportunities to get them to campus, but that's a long time. That's a long time from now. In recruiting world, a month is a long, long time. So Penn State pushed hard to get potential flip targets to campus. This weekend, they hosted 4. That's a remarkable job to be able to secure those guys, because it ain't easy. Like, they don't like flip information out there. It's made clear to me several times last week. It is a delicate situation when you're talking schools, you're talking coaches, you're talking parents, you're talking everybody involved in the process. Like, we didn't report Lex Cyrus was here until he was in the car on Saturday heading to State College. And I know that's only a 90-minute trip, but it's still, it's a tense 90 minutes to make sure those guys show up. But Lex Cyrus, Brandon Finney from McDonough was the guy that Ryan Snyder wrote about last week. That he was here as the Oregon commit. Josh Johnson, a surprise show from Louisville. Very, very interesting prospect, interesting recruitment over the summer. At one point, we thought he was going to be a Nittany Lion. At one point, he told us he was going to be a Nittany Lion.
I was going to say, it was on a lock at one point.
Not bitter about that at all. But you look at Penn State's need now at safety. He's a defensive back, one of those guys. He's about 6'2", 190. So he kind of fits in that safety mold. Maybe that plays some corner and then move over to safety mold. But Josh Johnson, all of a sudden, an important target for Penn State. And then finally, Bradley Gompers from Pittsburgh Central Catholic, a guy that we've talked about on the show. I know the show loves him. For many reasons, but Pennsylvania linebacker is always going to turn headlines here. So those 4 getting on campus, and we had updates on all 4 yesterday on Blue White Illustrated. Ryan actually had an interview with Brandon Finney that he ran last night. But important targets for Penn State, because about half the board there, maybe not quite half the board. I put out a couple of trimmings last week of names that are just all over the place, but very important. I can't emphasize how important it is to get those guys in at the beginning of October, because you're not going to have a chance to get more guys in until November 2nd. So just one of those things to get in the back of your mind. There's not much time left in the class of 2025. Penn State has 24 commitments. It's split down the middle, 12 and 12. Still have needs at different positions. You have needs at wide receiver. You're always going to look at offensive linemen. No matter how many offensive linemen you have, you're always going to look at offensive linemen. Same with defensive line. A linebacker. Do you need a linebacker, T. Frank, do you think? I mean, you got a couple in this class, and you've got some options with guys like LeVar Arrington II, but you got a guy like Bradley Gompers in your backyard. Yeah. All of a sudden, you need a linebacker. So that makes sense. And, of course, safety is one that's definitely, with Antonio Branch flipping to Colorado, is one that matters a lot. So 2025 was not active, or 2024 was not active down the stretch last year. I looked at, I think they flipped Tyser Denmark. Was that it in 2024? And then they got Jalen Harvey late, who wasn't a flip, but that's pretty much the action after the summer break there. So it's a really interesting difference from last year. And I think you can talk scholarships. I think you can talk expanding that roster and things like that as contributors, but also I think they're a little bit more aggressive this year.
2 things kind of pop into my mind during that conversation. First off, at linebacker, until I figure out who's a linebacker and who's an edge rusher, I don't know. But you bring up a really great point about safeties, linebackers. It feels like those 2 should be vying for the same spots on a recruiting roster, and it seems like they're just going to take all of them. If you want more of the information on some of the flip targets and some of those flip candidates, check out our latest issue of Inside the Den, the premium members only podcast at bluewhiteillustrated.com, where Fitz and Ryan Snyder go through pretty much the entire flipboard and give you their opinions on the situation with those players heading into the game last weekend. So the information is still very relevant considering the number of players we talked about. And of course, they've got more information on those players updated since then at bluewhiteillustrated.com. But that you bring up a very important point that I had not adjusted in my mind. It's not December 20th, it's December 4th. When it comes to down the stretch, coaching changes and things like that, of last minute recruitments popping up during the football season, how important is it to get some of this work done now? And I guess, what is, in your mind, what's the mad dash going to be like in those final couple weeks if coaches are getting fired and you're trying to reestablish relationships or gauge interest of players to potentially join if you haven't been considering them at some point?
Yeah, it kind of changes the timeline on some of the stuff, because you used to have that window in December where all those coaching changes would happen, and all of a sudden you might get a guy in for an official visit on the weekend of December 12th or something like that, just to just kind of fill out the rest of your class, or potentially just add a big one to end with. Now it's basically you're looking at game days as your chance to get that done. And while there is still that added element of if a coach gets fired on December 15th, like the gate opens and potentially those guys can go elsewhere. Like, I don't know how that's going to play out, but that's certainly a potential situation there. Will coaches get fired earlier to change that? Or will coaches be held on after signing day and essentially screw the kids over?
Yeah.
Hey, do you want to tell people that administrators are all happy people, great people? Like,
right.
I mean, that's kind of where we're at with that. So, so it'll be interesting. I'm not sure how it's going to play out. It's just gonna be a difference there because you're taking that 2-week period out after the season, which I think helps because coaches don't want to be on the road in December. Coaches don't want to be, trying to tie up loose ends when you're preparing for a conference championship game, when you're preparing for a playoff now, when you're preparing for a bowl game eventually. So I think that helps in that aspect. But I think there's going to be a few loose ends that are going to need tied up after this cycle. So it'll be fun. Penn State still got an opportunity to host guys for that Ohio State game, the Washington game, the Maryland game. And I think that, and after that Maryland game, it goes quiet and then goes dead. So it's not bad. It's not good. I just think it's different. You're going to have to adjust to that in your mind. Cause I know, in the last week I've had a tough time doing that.
Yeah. And it just, once again, thinking about all the things that happened in December, now with an expanded playoff with more games in December, the transfer portal window opening. I don't even know at this point when it opens anymore. I know they're changing the rules about it or considering changing the rules about the spring window. And of course, recruiting signing period. It's almost like these two things shouldn't happen at the same time, but yet they do all the time.
Right.
All season long.
Right. But things will keep rolling through the early December. And then you've got that January window for transfer visitors. So the portal is going to be what heats up. So, and coaches want to focus on the portal at that point. Like it's one thing, you're balancing high school recruiting versus portal recruiting. And that's one thing to do it from a phone. But when you have to get on a plane and go all over the place, I mean, that's tough. That's why we circle back around to airport talk. But beyond that, this weekend, sorry, Nate, for phasing you out here, but this weekend, nice group of 2026 is on hand. Travis Johnson, the speedy wide receiver from Virginia, Jermaine Kinsler, Marlon Bright, a couple of linemen from North Jersey, and Carter Meadows, the defensive end from Gonzaga that I really like, that Penn State really likes. He was in town, and we'll wrap it up with Jackson Samuels Ford from Malvern Prep, a guy that's a really good football player, really good athlete, came onto the scene this summer at camp, earned an offer from Penn State, earned an offer from Michigan. Looks like a pretty good player. So he talked to Ryan. He was pretty well impressed by this weekend.
And for more of that information, the details on that conversation, another reminder, BlueWhiteIllustrated.com is 50% off for a year. You cannot get a better deal on anything. If you love football, if you love arguing on the internet, like this is the place for you. If you like having conversations about things, if you enjoy learning about X's and O's or wrestling, recruiting, basketball, any of that stuff, is the promo code for 50% off a year subscription to BlueWhiteIllustrated.com, meaning the 2025 season and the 2025 version of you is going to be thanking yourself for joining us for a full year at that price. Guys, this is a rare occurrence. I came out of the film room. I exist in this square box 90% of my life. I actually got to Antifragile this past weekend. It was great to see you guys out there. We had a great time. Unfortunately, I can't drink beer, but Fitz, Nate, you guys can. How was the beer at Antifragile, Nate?
It was great. It was great. It's always great. It is a delightful selection of craft beer, locally brewed, actually literally on site. Honestly, like really good beer. I don't know how else to explain it. The vibe is great. People come on out Friday afternoons before games. Honestly, anytime really. Post game, it's great. Fitz and I we have made a habit out of checking in there, having a cheesesteak from John's, and really enjoying the whole operation that they have there.
And we really appreciate, Fitz, the people that support us by supporting the people who support this show. And Nate was the king or the governor of Antifragile on Friday. People were so happy to see Nate. It was amazing. And you, of course, but I was blown away at the number of people that shook our hand and be like, we love your show. We're here because you suggested, including some people I didn't expect personally. I don't want to betray their trust, but there were a lot of people there from a lot of different walks of life that watched the show and that took our suggestion from this conversation to go check out Antifragile.
Yeah, I'm just a wingman here. He's Maverick. I'm Goose. Actually, I got to figure out a different metaphor for that one. But no,
because you don't want to die.
Yes, that's it.
You
nailed it. Yes, thank you for showing everyone the behind the scenes there. And spoiler alert, by the way. No, it was like a freaking family reunion in there on Friday. Everybody was, flagging us down, mostly Nate, because everybody loves Nate, of course. But no, it was really great to see so many people that were there because they heard about it on this show. And that's what, that's what we hope advertising does, on both ends. It helps us, it helps them, it helps our local economy. It helps a local business that we, enjoy and believe in as well. So we were really appreciative of everybody that was coming through. Nate loves the beer. I'm the beer guy, and Nate was like, "Hey, let's get another one." And I was like, "I gotta go get my kids." And he's like, "Well, we could get another one." And I'm not very strong-willed, so I got another one. So, but no, it was a terrific time. We sat up there in those chairs upstairs. Had a little business meeting, of course, as we always do. Talk shop, not really, but no, it was a good time. And you know what else is a good time? Drinking for a cause. And this weekend at Antifragile, John came to me and was like, "We want to do something to help people that have been affected by the hurricanes down south." So what they're going to do this weekend is $1 from every draft sold goes to hurricane relief on Saturday. I'm going to pop down there when I can. I'm not sure how the schedule fits out. Of course, with the game on 3:30, they're going to play the game on the projector on the big screen. But we're going to get down there and help that out. So watch football, drink beer, and do good is what they're thinking here this weekend. Probably more details later in terms of the organizations that it's going to go to. But hey, you want to help people, you want to drink beer. That's kind of our lane here. And Antifragile is helping us do that. So this Saturday, make it down there when you can, help out when you can, because not only do people need it now, but it looks like more people are going to need it soon. So hopefully we can do as much as we can and enjoy ourselves and join us down there on Saturday.
Yep. And any other details we get about that, we'll talk about on the Thursday show, so people are well aware of what's going on there as well. So thanks to Antifragile for being awesome and for doing that. Now let's get into what everyone wants to talk about, runway length. And that's not a euphemism.
They have both gotten reps with runs.
Okay, so we've teased it for about 17 minutes now on the show. One of the major talking points was, when is Penn State leaving for Southern California? Why are they leaving? And what is their travel schedule? So Penn State is flying out of Harrisburg, Nate Bauer. And this is what James Franklin had to say about the situation leaving State College and why they can't do that from
Not
here.
only are we one of the most northeast schools, but based on runway length, size of plane, weight of plane, fuel on plane, we can't get out of here unless we would stop for fuel. So with that, we got to fly out of Harrisburg. So, to me, that's one of the things I think we have to discuss is increasing the size of the runway here and the size of the airport for a lot of reasons, for the university, for the community, for businesses, for the athletic department, and for us now that we've, decided to make this move as a Big Ten. To me, that's something that we need to do.
So, Nate, let me ask you just a stupid question to begin with that I asked you yesterday when we were talking about this. Who owns the State College Airport? Who's in control of the size of it? How does any of that work? Because I think we all know airports exist, but I have no idea who runs them or how it works.
The Monopoly man, that's not.
The Illuminati? I don't know. I don't know.
Yeah, I think it's federally. I'm going to sound stupid trying to talk specifics about any of this stuff.
Okay.
Because
so let's dive in and not talk specifics about it. And just so from that perspective, what of that is interesting and what of it is relevant to something in the future that is actionable more than just, I think all of the three of us here live in State College and would like the opportunity to fly out of State College, independent of football or any of those things. And it's just not a reality. So I guess, like, what is actionable or reasonable in this conversation?
Yeah, so I think that there is a broader conversation that, right, the idea that James Franklin has the political capital to get the runway extended so that Penn State football can make one trip yearly to the West Coast, to UCLA, Oregon, Washington, what have you, is not, that's not it, right? Like that's not what he was saying. That's not what this is about. It is about the changing nature of what State College is, the community, what the airport represents to the region, the amount of commerce that is coming into this area. You've spoken broadly with Happy Valley Adventure Bureau, right?
Mm-hmm.
There is a push to expand and change kind of what this community is. And the airport is a big, significant part of that. It changes things, having the ability. Greg brought this up in a different instance, and I think that somebody's going to crush me on this if this is wrong, but you have to have customs at your airport if you're going to fly internationally. And I don't think State College has the ability to do that. I think, and that includes private air travel. So there are all kinds of things that are at play and at work with the airport itself, right? How it operates, how it functions. And then on top of that, the ability, as he said, right? If you're going to get bigger planes in and out of State College, that's what's necessary. It cannot happen for the things that he laid out, the runway length, for the size of plane, weight of the plane, fuel on the plane. They have to make a choice. Basically, they cannot leave from State College. I also think, and somebody else can get in on this, but I think the jet stream also has something to do with it, right? As you go west, you're flying into the wind. It's a longer flight,
and so therefore you need to have more fuel too. So that's why they can, as we have done before, had the conversation before, like you can land there because you have less fuel in the plane because fuel is heavy, but you can't take off because you don't have the weight of the plane. Fitz, this also has implications for recruiting as well. Not to circle back to Fitz's recruiting update, but this has long been a conversation of getting to State College is hard. I guess holistically for football, obviously the answer is a larger airport. Are there ways? I don't even know. Like, I don't ask you, are there ways around it? But like, just what are the wide-reaching implications of not having, as James Franklin talked about, an international airport or an airport large enough to service some of these situations they need?
Save the whales, pay the teachers, make the airport runway longer. I love the easy argument here. No, I mean, it's about getting more flights and to more places. I mean, that's basically it from an accessibility standpoint. If you look at Penn State's peers that it's recruiting against, it's hard to get to Penn State. Now, there are a few outliers that definitely have challenges that are of a similar situation, but no, this has been ongoing forever. You know, really just as excuse me, as everything gets further apart, it also gets closer, especially in recruiting, because it's easier to hop on a plane from Florida and potentially get to State College in 4 hours. But not all those flights are available. You got 2 flights coming in from Philly. You got Chicago. You're very limited as to where you're going to go. Dulles is now back in the picture, so you're limited on how those connections work. And then as that happens, the price goes up, and the price is not affordable for most prospects. So you work that back into it. So I think that's it. But you look beyond that. You look beyond recruiting. It is absolutely been an issue for staff building. It has, you remember back, Bob Shoup's wife never moved here. Herb Hand's wife never moved here because of where we're at in State College. And they want to be able to get away and go wherever they want to go and do those things. Like coming from Nashville to State College is a huge, huge culture shock for a lot of people. But also, if James Franklin's trying to hire coordinators, assistants, and their families and things like that, those are challenges that are legitimate challenges, because it's not about going to Penn State and going to coach for this storied program and things like that. It's moving your entire family. It's figuring out schools, which we have good schools here, but it's figuring out how things are different from your prior stop. And if you have similar opportunities, say you're going to, have an opportunity to coach at Penn State, and you're going to have an opportunity to coach at Michigan, like Michigan is more accessible. You can fly to Detroit and you can be there in 30 minutes or whatever.
Yep.
So those things are things that come into play in a broader sense. Now, are we splitting hairs with the real question here? And it's that selfishly, I want more flights so I can go more places and be easier. Yes, we're doing that. But at the same time, it's a legitimate struggle that Penn State's worked against for the better part of the last decade.
And so I don't know that we have time to get into all the different facets of this, as James Franklin laid out very broadly and skim the surface of. It's good for the university. It's good for businesses. It's good for Penn State football. It's good for athletics in general. The viability of that, of could Penn State become, just let's hypothetically, the third largest city in Pennsylvania if they were to expand the access to it. I don't know that any of that is a conversation any of us have the intelligence or the foresight to really have here, but there is the reality of performance on the field being affected by travel that they have to go through, not just from the jet lag and those things, but a loss of practice time and a loss of just work hours, Nate. So just kind of go through what you understand of how impactful having to go to Harrisburg to fly directly impacts that sort of situation with Penn State trying to get out to USC and keep a normal schedule.
Yeah, it is not quite 2 hours, but for all intents and purposes, it's 2 hours from State College to the Harrisburg airport, right? By the time you load everybody up on the bus, get there, you've got to go through, they still do security even for private flights, right? So you've got to scan all those people that are going to get onto that airplane. You take off, it's a 5-hour flight going west. And then obviously you've got the transfer from LAX or wherever they're flying into, maybe it's Burbank, to get to their hotel. So that is a huge full day just to get there. The fact that they're doing it on Thursday is their jog through day. They don't have right. So Tuesday and Wednesday are their heaviest practices. They do a Thursday jog through, and then Friday is Fast Friday, where they have kind of a quick, in duration of time practice, but one that is at full speed to get themselves up for the game. So which Nugget will be at SoFi Stadium on Friday morning in LA for Penn State.
It's what we call reporting here from Nate Bauer.
Hey-o. No, but I do think it's very interesting. This whole, I have had input from a friend of mine who does, again, we average civilians have no idea what it's like, what it is about dealing with high performance athletics, right? This is a ramp up. It is so finely tuned. Their bodies, how it all operates is right. They try to nail it down.
Scientific.
It is scientific.
It's not a general approach of rub dirt on it and get some sleep, then have some coffee. There is physiological differences that you can account for in these situations.
And including coffee, right? And when you have coffee before performance, all of those things are so finely tuned that to take a day out of the process, I get it, right? As an average onlooker, it's like, what's the big deal? You're just sitting in a bus, you're just flying on a plane. Okay, who cares? But it is something that they spent an incredible amount of time, energy, resource learning about, right? All of this is new in terms of Penn State football operation trying to go to the West Coast. And it's the same process for those teams from the West Coast trying to come east. So, but it's different, and it's something that they've had to figure out, and they're going to give it a go. And as James Franklin said, they quote, he feels good about the plan. But you're not going to know until it actually happens. And so they'll see how this goes this weekend.
We have a story in 3 parts here in the chat, and I'm going to derail the conversation just quickly, but we're going to get to a new subject here in a second. John Gold says, why am I not able to contribute during the live chat, but the thanks will show up after the live chat? I told him I don't necessarily know. I've never been on that end, but here we have a successful donation.
Hey,
So he figured it out. I love seeing the drama unfold live. Now, John, he says, I think I got it. So, John, if you have a question, you want something to discuss, absolutely throw it in there, and we'll talk about it. So the next part of this conversation has to do with the receivers and how Penn State has had diverse contributions throughout its 5 games.
I still think there's some guys, specifically at the wide receiver position, that we have to continue to get the ball in their hands to develop that aspect of our offense. The thing that I do think is a positive is there's been a game where, Omari's made some really big plays. There's been games where Trey's made some really big plays and been very productive. And then obviously Liam this past week and Julian has flashed. So I think that's helpful. We'd like it to be a little bit more consistent.
Fitz, do they need a number 1 wide receiver in the biggest games to come through in the biggest moments, or can they go wide receiver by committee and that works in a championship level? Because, of course, nobody cares about beating USC, really. Nobody cares about beating UCLA. They care about what happens in December, and does Penn State finally get to a playoff and make some noise?
It's tough to say that they need a number 1 receiver to step up, because you got Tyler Warren as, I don't want to say the focal point, but I think he
100%.
leads in targets right now. So how do you make the tight end your number 1 guy, which kind of lends to the second answer, right? That you got to spread it out to everybody, spread out those targets, spread out those catches and things like that, and run more plays, go back to the early season mantra there. But it's just very interesting how the target share has developed. I mean, how they've had different leading receivers, I think 4 times in 5 games. Liam Clifford was the guy that stepped up this week, and I think he did a really good job and look good doing it, in the sense, it's great that he has that long bomb down the middle, but going across the middle a couple of times, Drew made a couple of really good throws, holding on to the ball. That's what you got to do. Omari Evans had the drop this week, so maybe he takes a step back. Liam Clifford takes a couple steps forward. So I think that's really what you're looking at. And T. Frank, what were we talking about, you and I, before we came onto this show? Who were we referencing there?
We were talking about Stephon Diggs and the Buffalo Bills.
Right. So you, as a Bills fan, Bills diehard, have watched Stephon Diggs in that offense the last couple of years, and you feel that Josh Allen has gone out of his way, or whoever was calling the plays went out of their way to involve the number 1 receiver in Stephon Diggs. Now, Stephon Diggs is gone, transferred to the Texans. But that is the kind of thing that you're seeing with Penn State now. I think it's opened up a little bit more. You got Warren involved more. You got in the backs a little bit more involved, probably not as involved as we thought they would be at this point, but a little bit more involved. And you've got Clifford, Evans, and Fleming kind of picking up the slack. Of course, Caden Saunders was in a booth this weekend. I don't think we're going to see him anytime soon. So you've got different options to work with. So it's not bad. It's not good. It's just different. And I think they worked around that. I do think things get tighter in big games, especially on the road. So maybe see a little bit more concentration to Warren, Trey Wallace, who had has had a couple of good weeks, but not West Virginia weeks, if that makes sense. He was spectacular against West Virginia, set the bar so high that you're thinking 50, 60 yards is just a ho-hum day for him. But he's done some good things, move the sticks. So you've got weapons, you've got skilled guys that have the ability to give you wins in certain spots, and that's, I think, really what you were missing last year.
So I don't always want to go back to Kansas and everything at Kansas has to be the way it is at Penn State, because we have seen over time Andy Kolnicki has done anything and everything in his offense to formulate and craft a winning plan. But over the last 2 seasons at Kansas, last year specifically, the top 3 receivers had 57 targets, 50 targets, and 50 targets. So this is a receiver by committee style of offense to begin with. Even if you look at 2022, Luke Grimm had 80 targets. He led the team from the slot. And then Lawrence Arnold had 65. So even if it's a 1A, 1B situation, it is not a guy that has 135 targets, Jahan Dotson 2021 situation, and then somebody else has 40. The point is the quarterback is the ball distributor. He is the point guard. And that to bring it back to what Fitz said, this was the Bills' plan when they got rid of Stephon Diggs, is we're going to be whoever's open, that they get the football. We're going to have an overwhelming number of targets at tight end, running back, and receiver that you cannot cover everybody because everyone is a target. The problem is when your receivers actually suck, that's the problem. If they're not actually getting open, and you are trying to sell me that Mac Hollins is a great replacement for all the things you lost, then you've lost to me. Penn State's not in that situation because, to me, I do think Liam Clifford is good enough. I do think Trey Wallace is good enough. And I think that Amari Evans, when he plays at his best, is a valuable piece of this puzzle. And if it's all surrounding Tyler Warren, who you're designing to get the ball to, that is enough to supplement. Nate, agree or disagree on that particular situation? Because there is a school of thought that you need a number one wide receiver. I've talked multiple times with Landon Tangwall on our tailgate show. He says you got to have a number one receiver. You have a guy that you go to when you got to have a play. Do you think that that's fair, or do you think what they're doing can sustain?
I don't think it's been put to the test yet, so I'm not sure what it actually is. Right? To me, they have been. I think it has been intentional, purposeful, however you want to phrase it, to get guys involved, right? And so James Franklin talking about Liam Clifford has had a 100-yard day, Tyler Warren has had a 100-yard day, Trey Wallace has had a 100-yard day, and Amari Evans has had a 100-yard day. So they've had 4 100-yard receivers in 5 games. I don't think that is just a symptom of giving what the defense gives them, right, or taking what the defense gives them. Right. I think that now, do I think that's part of it? Yeah, for sure. But I do think that it is a happy byproduct of what they've been running. And so I don't know that we've gotten to that point in the season where you know what that looks like, right? And I mean, I said it after the game, but nobody other than Bowling Green for the first half of that game has really stressed Penn State offensively this season, right? They haven't been, they haven't needed to do something in a certain time. So if you're asking me like, oh, what, when it's crunch time, do you have a guy that is automatic that you're going to get the ball to no matter what? I don't know. I mean, I would think that it's Tyler Warren, number one for sure. Like you and I sat and talked about it yesterday. The way that the targets break down so far this season all makes sense. It's exactly what you would anticipate. It is Tyler
with
Warren
the
up top.
exception of the early season for Liam because he was hurt.
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct.
Yeah.
So Liam and Julian, I would anticipate will flip flop, right? But other than that, the notion of having Tyler up top and then Trey Wallace, Amari Evans, right, and then Liam Clifford, I think that's pretty much according to plan. Yeah,
and I think that maybe even a blessing in disguise is you got Amari Evans involved so early and built up his confidence a little bit, because that element, they are designing around his speed to get him some shot plays, which when you don't throw the ball a whole lot, I feel like gives a supersized feeling to his contributions to the offense. Even if he's getting 3 targets a game, they are big targets. This show needs to be 90 minutes long with the number of things that we have to cover. James Franklin moving his press conference to Mondays means we've got to get through what he had to say, the previous game, and also your questions in the mailbag. So a lot of the questions in the mailbag we're actually going to be starting to do on Wednesdays now. But I do want to talk about Penn State UCLA before we just flush it and move on to USC. Guys, looking back on this particular game, 27-11 does not accurately reflect the conversation around what this game was, which was Penn State was in control the entire time. And I don't think UCLA presented a viable threat at any point outside of the first drive where they didn't score points because they went for it on 4th down. So Fitz, what's your main takeaway from the UCLA game and how it played out?
Yeah, well, wow, I didn't expect that. Sorry about that. That was very unprofessional, but I'm glad I'm not doing an Alabama podcast. Glad I'm not doing a Tennessee podcast. Glad I'm not doing a Missouri podcast, because it'd be different because Penn State won comfortably. And that's what it's becoming more and more every week as you watch college football. Like, the best way, going back to the last topic we talked about, the best way to avoid having to make that decision on a number one receiver, having to step up during crunch time, is avoiding crunch time. Penn State's done that. And so on one hand, you don't have the adversity that you've faced so far, or that you're going to have to face when you play, say, Ohio State, something like that. So you're missing out on that, but also you're winning comfortably in a way, first half of Bowling Green aside, that makes you feel pretty decent about, hey, if everyone else loses and we keep winning, and all of a sudden it's 11-1, and that looks really good. Like, that's a good spot to be in. So that's where I start with the UCLA game. But yes, it was one of those things. I mean, it's two-sided in that, yes, the comfortable win is great. You would like to see them a little bit more overwhelming, but at the end of the day, like, you're not seeing that in college football at all.
Yeah.
Like, there are two teams right now, Texas and Ohio State, that have been pretty overwhelming. Even Texas, stubbed its toe a little bit early. Louisiana Monroe, one of those Louisiana teams they were facing. So Penn State is pretty typical in terms of the top teams right now. Do I think they're the fourth most talented, the fourth best team in the country? Not exclusively, no. But they have done a nice job in keeping that thing going. And the schedule's been great, and the flow has been up and down, but they have just kept going. And that's what's important here. It's the wins. I mean, we're not here to talk about the wins and losses for an hour or whatever, because we're going to break down everything and go deeper. But at the same time, like, the end result is the thing that we're all looking for. And so far they've gotten that, and you gotta commend them for it, because not everybody has.
Nate, this is a conversation I'm interested in, something I thought about at the end of the game against UCLA, when Penn State puts in its second string defense and allows UCLA. They obviously wanted to stop them for a 3-and-out or whatever. They didn't, and James Franklin still played the backups. Does margin of victory matter anymore in a 12-team playoff, where you don't have to put together a resume for a 4-team playoff or a BCS computer that is looking at all of those factors? Has that been flushed out, and it's just win the game in front of you?
I don't know about flushed out, but is it diminished? Yeah, I think so. I think that not just margin of victory, but margin of error has changed substantially. And so, are some of those things, there is a bunch of different stuff all at work, all at the same time, right? Penn State has injuries that have created a greater demand to accelerate the development of backups, because these guys are going to have to play in many cases. Just in general, the expansion of the playoff means more teams are going to get in. Now look, like, Penn State wants to win all of its games. Getting to the playoff is not the sole goal. Yes, you want to get to the playoff, but you also want to be top 4. You also want a first round at home, right? I mean, any of those different dynamics are all at play and all need to be balanced. But I don't think the idea of, hey, you have to win every game 56-0. Look, if this last weekend did not demonstrate very plainly that everyone is vulnerable, right? I'm not sure how to help you, right? And so Penn State's level of comfort in controlling and winning the games that they've played to this point is indicative of the success that they've had, right? Or the quality of team that this is. It's a good football team. Is it the 4th best team nationally? I don't know. I'm not sure about that. And I think that the depth and some of the injury concerns that they've had to this point in the season are, issues, right, that they're going to have to contend with moving forward as the meat of this schedule comes into play. But overall, I don't think they're going to argue with where they're at so far.
We got to move on to the BWI Mailbag, because people are asking questions that need answers, not only in the chat, but at bluewhiteillustrated.com. So let's get to your questions, and let's talk about Penn State USC. It is pretty clear that USC has had multiple welcome to the Big Ten moments this year so far. Zach C86, new member of BlueWhiteIllustrated.com. I'm presuming he took advantage of the 50% off deal going on right now with promo code WeAre. He says, given USC is light on the D line, down a man with Bear Alexander's red shirt, plus having Nick Singleton back, do you think Penn State will be run heavy this weekend? On the flip side, is this going to be another game where their QB gets the ball out in 2 seconds? Probably going to have to, given their offensive tackles versus Penn State's defensive ends. Fitz, matchup in the trenches seems to favor Penn State. Do you agree with Zach 86 here in his question about the game?
Well, he's a new member on BWI, so of course I agree with him.
Exactly.
Great to have Zach on board. Yes, Penn State's advantage in the trenches, I think, is significant on one side of the ball and pretty decent on the other side as well. You saw that against Minnesota this weekend. USC has certainly struggled to keep Miller Moss. I wouldn't say upright. I guess I would say upright, but they've had him bail out and they've had him do a lot of different things. And, he's a good, really talented quarterback. Absolutely. But you look at Penn State's pass rush and it's a real opportunity this weekend. I kind of reminds me of West Virginia with Garrett Green, even though they're completely different quarterbacks, is you've got an opportunity to control this game through the line of scrimmage. And I think that you look at how the line of scrimmage travels and how that's worked in the past. And I think Penn State's got a distinct advantage there. The second part of the question, do they get the ball out quick? I do think they get the ball out quick. If you look at the quotes from UCLA after the game, it was basically, hey, this is a new quarterback. We got to get that ball out in 2 seconds. Like, this is their pass rush. The pass rush for Penn State is so good that you've got to get that ball out. And that's how you negate it. You also negate it with the screen game, the misdirection game, the draw game. And I think that that's probably what you're going to see with USC's offense this week because of that offensive line and because it's not good. It's not good. So very, very one-sided advantage for Penn State on paper. We will see how that goes and how USC will combat that. And I think they do that with screens. I think they do that with quick throws. I think they do that with draws and taking advantage of the aggressiveness. And UCLA did a little bit in the second half too, is still running the football because Penn State was so amped up to get to the quarterback, to get around those edges. And I think you're going to see that more on Saturday from USC.
It's interesting looking at the USC offense. And I think that the offensive line, the issues there really take the sting out of Lincoln Riley's offense because his offense is built around running the football. I know we talk about, all the way back to Baker Mayfield and Kyler Murray. And these quarterbacks had really big windows to throw into because if you didn't plan for their running game and the way they used RPOs and counters and really started a kind of a new way of running these offensive systems that has proliferated in a lot of different areas and people have adopted this, then you were going to have these wide open throws. And so without the threat of a run game and without the ability to hold up in pass protection, they can't get Zachariah Branch the ball down the field is what it seems like. So I do think that the matchup in the trenches is something that USC, it's not just the Big Ten, going back even to the Pac-12. I have to give credit. I have to pause the show. And if I don't, I need a Zoe was right graphic because it's the Pac-12. My wife is a Utah grad. She is well aware of what goes on there. She's like, USC is not going to be able to win anything in the Big Ten. She thinks Oregon is a fraud because if you look at the time they spent and Utah and their Big Ten style of defense shut those teams down. Now you have actual Big Ten teams, and we're seeing it is kind of like that for these two teams. So let's get to the question du jour in the chat. It's been asked more than once.
One question here, T. Frank. Was that her that texted me from your phone a couple weeks ago saying Oregon's a fraud? Because I think that's the exact text that I got.
I asked it with a question mark. She says it with a statement. She says it with a period. So that's the difference. Is I'm like, maybe, and she's like, no, they suck. CJ Ruger asks, do the kick gloves come off and we serve something other than vanilla this week? There is more to show, right? And let's go into the chat. And David Bortner asks, is James Franklin holding Andy Koldnicki's offense back with stay on schedule? Guys, is this a vanilla offense from Penn State football? Nate, your thoughts on the offense, please go and say words here. I really want to dig into this conversation.
Yeah, I think that this is, not anybody asking question, not their fault necessarily, but this is the limit of a show like ours is that I'm not able to ask questions about the question that's being asked because I don't understand the question. Right? I've seen many different. There is a loud vocal. I'm not sure how you describe it. A number of Penn State fans who have watched this offense this season and are upset by what they claim is gimmickiness, right?
Mhm.
That it's too gimmicky. Well, if that's true, and it is too gimmicky, can it also be vanilla? Is that possible?
We're going to get into another dichotomy later on the defense because yes, that seems to be the thing is like whatever is dissatisfying fans, Nate, it is dissatisfying them in a way that they can't really put their finger on. Nobody agrees on what is dissatisfying here.
And I think that is a perfect way to sum up, really what it's been so far. Again, that they have controlled games in so many ways. Look, national stats here, right? The 17th ranked rushing offense, the 4th ranked team passing efficiency. So do they have a ton of passing yards? No, they're kind of middle of the pack there. But in terms of their passing efficiency, this is a run first offense. Yes, like absolutely. It is a run first offense who then picks and chooses their spots and does it well. Right? Drew is overwhelmingly, and again, you and I, T. Frank, have had conversations about this. Can Drew make better decisions? Yeah. Right.
Mm-hmm.
Sure. There are times when he can make, but overall, have they been better than his decisions last year? I think so.
Yeah.
Right. For the most part.
And he's also given better options.
Third down conversion percentage is 7th nationally. Their red zone offense, they are scoring 91% of their trips into the red zone. They have done all of the things that have been asked. I think that they have been, and this is backed up by the nature of the last 2 games that they have played. They have been less explosive over the past 2 games. You have not seen the 40, 50-yard touchdowns. I think Nick Singleton not being part of last week's game had something to do with that. Against UCLA, and Illinois just squeezed the air out of the football. I do think that there's a broader conversation to be had about how little Penn State has had, like just the lack of plays, I think has continued
drives,
right? Drives, right? The number of possessions that have happened for Penn State, because if you look at time of possession, it's not terrible, right? They've had the ball for 31 minutes a game, which is again middle of the pack. But I just think that there have been certain limitations on how I don't know, like how crazy why, right? Their ability to get to 50 points is called into question when they only have the ball 7 times in non-garbage time situations. So we'll see what happens, this weekend with an opponent that I would anticipate is not going to take the air out of the football necessarily, right? I would anticipate maybe a few more 3 and outs for both sides and a few more possessions to this game, but we'll see.
Fitz, this is your thought first, but to me, he told you exactly what he was in his opening press conference, what Andy Kolnicki was going to do at Penn State. Yeah. But did you have something there that you wanted to play off with, Nate?
Multi-pronged here to, I guess, feed into this is the way that you sort of help this move in the right direction, the quote unquote right direction. I mean, it's in a direction that's 5-0, so that's pretty good, right? But scoring earlier, the first quarter possessions have been pretty empty. Like that's been an issue. They talk about the scripted drives and everything like that, but it is a fact they haven't done well in the first quarter. They haven't come out. I mean, actually, I won't say they haven't done well in the first quarter. They've come out and they've scored on, I think, 2 scripted drives this year. But it's been like in that flow, how does that come back? And then it comes back defensively in the sense that, yes, I think this defense is very good and they're not giving up points. And again, Penn State fans would set themselves on fire if they gave up 25 points a game like the 2016 defense did. I'm convinced of that. because it's so spoiled over the last couple of years, rightfully so. But they are giving up a couple of first downs, which gives you 2 minutes more in that time of possession, which takes that away from your offense, which takes, it's all just a chain here. And I think that's where you're looking at the inefficiencies there, is they don't have the ball as much because of those one or two, maybe a couple of first downs on those zones where they sit back and they get fans say they're getting picked apart, but a 7-yard completion that moves the sticks is what it is basically. And then they don't give up points in those drives. But it's one of those things where Manny's defense last year was so overwhelming in that sense, in that they would not give up the third downs that weren't the third and longs where the draw, where they got run on and things like that. But they would play back into field position. They would play back into the offense being in an advantageous situation. And I don't think we've seen that completely this year. I think that's the big thing in my end, is it's not so much the play, like the plays themselves, or the Tyler Warren taking direct snaps or Bo taking direct snaps. I don't think it's about that. I think it's the situation that they've been in. And I think you'd like to see that get a little better. Special teams hasn't been great this year. Riley Thompson was good up until this week, and then he was not good at all. Like that was probably his worst game that he's played. But field position plays into that. Turnovers play into that this defense has not forced many turnovers this year. So I think that when you're talking about offensive efficiency or offensive stability, maybe, like that is what it comes down to, is the defense really not giving them the get out of jail free cards that they gave them last year.
So a couple things here in the chat. Mini Moon says it's gimmicky when it doesn't work. It's creative when it does. That's how people think. I think that's a fair point of this conversation. But to back to what I was going to say originally is this is literally what Andy Kolnicki said when I asked him, hey, how do you create complexity for the defense but keep it simple for your offense? And his analogy was a blizzard. Vanilla ice cream is the base. This is a simple offense from a number of play perspective. And then the gimmicky part, that's the part that makes it hard for the defense to defend. So if you say, like, we want to play more straight up, then you're taking away the whole point of the offense. Secondly, and Nate, this is going to be, I think, a clarity moment for me in our conversation about Drew Aller and what I want to see from him in this offense. That 16-play drive sticks in my head because it was 16 plays. This offense needs a trigger man to throw the ball down the field aggressively and take advantage of the stacked box, the numbers, the tendency to come downhill on the run game. And there was just one play where I felt like he had Tyler Warren on a 4 vertical in the red zone that would have just resulted in a touchdown, and it would have cut off 7 of those plays. He decided not to throw that football on time as his first read. He wanted to look for a safer throw, from what I could see, to the sideline and then check it down to Katron Allen, but he got hit because he held the ball and Nolan Rucci gave up that pressure. If he throws that ball and he is aggressive down the field, this offense gets both of these things. But I told you all offseason, they ran fewer plays than Penn State did last year. They ran, I want to say, and I need to look up the number and be, hyper accurate with this, maybe 100 less plays than Penn State ran in 2023 at Kansas. So it is ball control with explosive passing. And so they're getting the explosive passing, but they're not getting 300 yards of explosive passing. And I'm not using this as an opportunity to be critical of Drew Aller. I'm trying to explain that part needs to be continually in every game. And so if they have a 7-play drive that has a 54-yard pass, or they don't get the Bo Prabula option play that gets them 30 on a running play, those are the explosive elements that are missing at times from this offense, but they're generating it in other ways. Nick Singleton, Katron Allen being explosive. So I guess I don't know what you're looking for other than complete domination, which I think is where, again, we go back to our margin of victory conversation. Does that matter to Penn State anymore? Where I think there might be some decisions made from number of drives you're trying to get and touchdowns and leaving the starters in that isn't necessarily important if you just win every game in front of you. On the other side, Zlati asks, with Tom Allen's zone preferences, how do we avoid Miller Moss picking us apart? Do we mix up coverage, blitz more, or others? Nate, you're already jumping in here.
2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Penn State is,
we like to call Nate counting.
Penn State is 8th. Penn State is 8th nationally in margin of victory.
Okay. Like that is revealing, I think. Keep things in perspective.
I mean, Penn State has just been I don't think it's as close as people think. So anyway, what was the question?
I just wanted to talk about the same conversation about the defense because of that opening drive and because Penn State has given up opening drives.
Yeah,
Fitz,
I haven't.
or whoever wants to take this one about the defense and their performance and not being 3 and out, 3 and out, 3 and out, 3 and out, 3 and out like they were in 2023.
Yeah, I mean, I think I would just echo, because I looked at it over the weekend. This notion of slow starts. It's really not that. Penn State has had good starting drives on defense, and they've had good starting drives on offense, and they've had okay special teams for the most part this season. I think the thing that James Franklin said yesterday is that they haven't really done it combined together, that complementary side of things, which is something that I do think has played out, particularly in the second and third quarters of games this season. It's just being able to get it all, kind of up to speed right out of the gates. But I again, it just feels the tenor of the conversation right now surrounding this program, to me, feels hyper critical, I guess. And I guess that's what you do. I guess that's part of it.
I see it as fear-based, afraid of the ways you will lose because you haven't presented a bulletproof argument that you have no flaws. But maybe that's just me projecting on certain things.
It will continue to be the climate around Penn State football until they do it against Ohio State.
Yep.
That's it.
Yeah.
That's all. That's right. There's a lot of talking, a lot of stuff all going on, but nobody that looks at this schedule is going to give any team any credit, right? If Penn State loses to Southern Cal this weekend, right, it's like the end of the world. But if Penn State doesn't, or if Penn State beats Southern Cal, it will mean that Southern Cal stinks, right?
Yeah.
Right. And so like the goalposts will continually move until Penn State has, and again, this is, I have been saying this for a while. Penn State, when they get to Ohio State, right, whether they are unbeaten or not, they have to look better. Right? Like, to me, with the expanded playoff, it doesn't really matter if they win or lose that game. Genuinely, like, at the end of the day, would it be better if Penn State wins that game for Penn State? Obviously, but for psyche, for the program, for the people that follow it, for all of the things, the people that are supporting the Penn State football program, they can't look inept, and I think that has been part of the problem. Certainly last year, is that offensively they just had nothing going for them, and so they gotta be able to figure that out and play a more competitive game, and certainly to their preference, win.
I apologize. Jay has donated a lot of money today, and Fitz, I want to end the show on his question, but just Robert Kaufman says the opposite. Bend but don't break is maddening and dangerous on defense. Penn State is number 3 in the Big Ten in terms of man coverage, press man coverage, and they are number 7 in terms of blitzing. That is not bend but don't break. Now, there is some zone blitzing, and I will give you there is some of that to be said about zone blitzing and the effectiveness of that, but they're aggressive. This is not a bend but don't break defense. And now Jay asks,
like I said earlier about the offense needing to score earlier, that changes the mindset of the defense as well. Excuse me, the defense needing to get those stops and how they play off of each other. Cause it's been a roller coaster, right? It's been, hey, the offense is good. Defense has given up a little bit. Defense is good. Offense is struggling again through this. So like those waves of inconsistent complementary football have been an issue. Like, I mean, I say an issue, but like they're 5-0. They're doing pretty good. Just as yards don't score points on offense, yards don't score points on defense. So you give up yards, you don't give up points. That's a win. I mean, that is where I'm at with this team, is that it's not going to be perfect. And maybe the video game coming back has skewed people's opinions on how things should go. Cause you're going to have 3 and outs. You're going to have, not every defensive drive is a 3 and out. So I think that's where we're at with all that stuff.
Finally here, Jay says, can you talk about Javen Williams? Nolan Rucci in pass protection worries him. What do you think of the tackle situation there as we turn towards preview of the game?
It was such a good question, and they threw it at the end. He was a 5-star, right? It doesn't matter. It does not matter that he was a 5-star. It does not matter that Javen Williams was a 5-star or close to a 5-star or whatever like that. I mean, he's a couple years into his career. Both of those guys a couple years into their career. Javen, I think, is still a little bit behind on that curve. I think he's a guy. So talking about Olu during his, what was it, redshirt freshman year, is like, that's a guy that can get out there and he can get in the way. Like, he can't do everything that Olu eventually did, but he can get in the way. I think Javen is not on that Olu path, but like, he could get in the way right now. He's not an effective blocker. He's not an effective guy that's going to move anybody out of the way. So I think that's what I get into with Javen. So I think there is a gap. Somebody asked earlier about the backup, because Donka is going to be, that's going to be a storyline this week. Is Anthony Donka ready to go? Didn't look great. His arm hanging down after that play in the first half, I believe it was, this weekend. So Rucci slides in there. Rucci, good run blocker, leaves something to be desired as a pass blocker. Kind of feel the same way with Javen because of his background, because of Wyomissing. He run block essentially, so he's still learning those things. I think he's a more natural fitted guard. But I think that's where JB Nelson comes into the mix as a potential right tackle, being a guy that and not a tremendous pass blocker by any stretch of the imagination on the edge either. But I think he gives you an opportunity on that right side to maybe help you out a little bit there. So I think Javen probably still a year away.
We're going to get into more of your questions. Robert Kaufman has a great question. There was a ton of things we couldn't get to today. So we're going to get to all of that tomorrow on the BWI live show, some of the interesting facts and facets from this past weekend. And of course, we'll preview UCLA because everyone wants to know about this upcoming game. So that's coming up. We got to go. We'll talk to you tomorrow on the BWI live show at 10 a.m. See you then.